Hi folks, Mike Lambo here with a quick look at Lone Sherman the Pacific. So here it is. As ever, you won't get this bar across the front, that's just on my proof copy. So let's get straight into the game. So table of contents as ever, and then you've got your map references. So one of the big changes between this game and Lone Sherman itself is that the terrain is different, obviously. So we have different hexes. There are more hexes that affect the number of dice you roll in the tank operations phase, for those of you who remember how to play Lone Sherman. So there's a bit more variety in how much you can do depending on what hex you're on. So the terrain is a little bit more varied in that sense. There are 12 missions, scenarios we call them this one. This time they're broken down into 4 groups of 3 scenarios to aid those that like to play them as a campaign. So you can play a little mini campaign of 3 scenarios each. I've got 2 of those on Tarawa and 1 on Saipan and 1 on Peleliu. So that's where they're the islands that are covered in this game. Other than that, it's very similar to Lone Sherman. It's a sequel to it, not an expansion of it. The rules are more or less the same, with some refinements and changes here and there. As I say, the main changes come from the terrain and also the units against which you will be fighting. We'll have a look at those in a moment. It's a standalone game. It's a standalone game, so you don't need Lone Sherman to play this. So then we got the rules running to the usual kind of 20 pages or so, I guess. Plenty of diagrams and things, big print, so it won't take long to get through those. And if you've played Lone Sherman, you won't have too much problem picking this up. As I say, there are a few changes, but you'll easily recognise those as you go through. And then we come to the scenarios themselves. You can see straight away very different, obviously, in terms of terrain. We have sea tiles, which are quite difficult for the Sherman to manoeuvre on. These represent obviously fairly shallow water through which the Sherman must travel in order to get to the beaches. We have trees, buildings. We've got a sea wall here, which features only on a couple of maps. So you can see those here, similar kind of scale as Lone Sherman, so it's about 100, I guess 150 yards per hex. We've got airstrips, airfields as well, which again dictate the number of dice rolled when you're manoeuvring your Sherman around and attacking and so on. Another one here with this is Saipan, initial landing again with a bit of sea before you're out. You can see the sea doesn't feature on all of them, but there they are. So we've got 12 of those, as I say, split up into 4 campaigns of 3. If you want to play it like that, they're all perfectly playable as individual scenarios if you wish. Then we've got the counters at the back there. I've done away with the hexagonal counters. I think it works fine as square counters, and they're slightly easier to print and cut than the hexagonal counters were. The facing is clearly marked on the counter to help for those counters that need a facing. So you can see we've got the Sherman, we've got some Type 95 Japanese tanks and some Type 97s, which are slightly stronger, but they're all fairly weak compared to your Sherman. So that's something that's quite different to how things were in the original Lone Sherman in Normandy, of course, where you're fighting against often stronger tanks. However, in this game, you do come against anti-tank guns and heavy artillery, and also infantry. Lots of infantry will come at you, and they will move in this game, whereas they didn't in the original Lone Sherman, of course. So obviously Germans generally in Normandy, fairly defensive, dug in, ordered not to retreat and so on. The Japanese, far more aggressive in their tactics, will often charged, as you know, I'm sure, often suicidal type charges, and that's what you're facing here. So your machine guns become far more important, I think, in this game than they were in the original Lone Sherman. So again, something just to mix things up a little bit in that sense. So not too many counters, nice and easy to cut out, stick them on some card and you're done. And that is Lone Sherman the Pacific. I will put up a full playthrough so you can see exactly how it works and how it differs to the original. Thanks guys.